So tape is designed to sound like cassette tape. I have a number of tape machines that are half broken or fully broken, and it just got to be a pain in the ass to try to keep them up. So I made this patch so I could just have something reliable, but I designed it to sound like actual, or what I think is actual tape sound. So it's actually a pretty straightforward signal path. You have stereo inputs, and your stereo inputs go straight into the reverb, which in this case is reverb light, partially for CPU, also because reverb light has a little bit of a lo-fi quality to it, I think. It's pretty heavily modulated, so it has kind of that woozy feeling to it to begin with. So we're going straight into the reverb because we want the reverb to happen before all of the modulation effects of the tape, because when you record the tape, traditionally, all of your audio exists before you put it on the tape. So the tape modulation comes after that. So that's why the reverb is in front. Stereo inputs, reverb outs go straight into these two overdrive distortion modules, left and right, and they are on the push setting, which I thought sounded the most tapey. And so out of your overdrives goes straight into a stereo compressor, because tape has kind of a quality of compression just by the nature of the medium. So we have a compressor, and out of the compressor goes into this vibrato. So the vibrato is giving us sort of the warble. So it's frequency modulation, but it's giving us that kind of warbly, woozy effect of the tape. And so straight out of the vibrato, we go into these two VCAs here. So the VCAs act as what I'm calling the dropouts section. So essentially, the VCAs are modulated by some random LFOs here to basically give, as the band of tape is running along the playhead, sometimes the tape warbles back and forth a little bit. So the distance between the tape and the playhead can vary side to side, which is your left and right. And so you'll have these inconsistencies left to right, which is part of what I think is so great about tape in general, and this patch particularly, because you can take a mono signal, which is straight down the middle, and you're applying all of these, even without the reverb, you're applying all of these stereo modulations to it. So it makes what would otherwise be a simple sound come alive, because it has all of these little, organic kind of things. And out of our VCAs goes into our filter section. Again, this is all left and right. Everything's processed in stereo here. So we have our low pass filter, which we have controls for on the main page. And then we have a high pass filter, which I have for the default save state, I have set to 200 hertz. I didn't put a control for that on the main page, but if you wanted to have more bass come through, obviously just come down to your filter page and turn these, turn that down to, 28 is as low as it goes. Keeping it at 200 hertz, it gives it more of like a little bit of that lo-fi sound that tape can sometimes have. Like a hi-fi tape machine is going to maintain the bass just fine. Some other tape machines are sometimes thin out the sound like that. So anyway, if when I'm using guitar or synth stuff or piano, I'll leave that on. But if I'm going to do something like that where I want the kick to come through, I'll turn that off. But keep in mind that this high pass filter is at the end of the chain. So if you have a real bass heavy input, you're still hitting the distortion with all of that bass. The filtering comes afterwards. So just keep that in mind, that anything that's bass heavy, turning up that high pass frequency is not going to change how hard it's hitting the overdrive. Out of the filters, that's it. Goes to our output. So on the main page here, you have 6 controls. Left to right here, we have noise level, input gain, low pass filter frequency, dropouts, output gain, and then your reverb. So let's start with input gain. So this is basically how hard you're pushing your overdrive. You know, this is the kind of patch that gain staging ahead of time, like in your signal chain, whether it's guitar or you're reamping or from a synth or something, how hot your signal coming in is going to make a big difference in terms of how hard you're hitting. But this gives you some flexibility. So turning it up hits the overdrive harder, gives you more distortion. Bring it down obviously cleans it up a little bit. And then coupled with this is this output gain, which is just a control that goes straight to the normal output gain control. So that just controls output for the whole thing. So that just gives you a little bit of flexibility to play with. So your noise level is super simple. Actually, let's turn it on. So without any audio coming through it, the first thing you hear is the noise. And the noise is coming from 2 white noise oscillators into a VCA. This VCA is what's controlled by that control on the main page. And they're both running through their own bandpass filters that is set on 1000 hertz as the center of the band there. That just kind of gives it, to me, it lets it sit in an audible range, but it keeps the sort of low end mud out. And you don't get a ton of that high hiss, but if you wanted to, obviously you just change, that's the left side there. That changes the frequency, and you can play with that. But where it's set by default is around 1000 hertz there. So then we have our dropouts control here, and that basically just controls the depth of the amplitude modulation by those VCAs. And actually with just the noise on, I'll turn that up so it's easier to hear. You can hear the dropouts already happening. If we turn that all the way up, you can hear those kind of bouncing left to right. The last thing here is just the reverb, and that just controls the wet dry on the reverb module itself. So I have a little guitar loop here that I'm going to use to just show some of the controls, and we can kind of play with it as we go. It's just coming through a mono loop pedal, and then it's going through the zoom here with some ping pong delay to give us just kind of that stereo field thing going on. Let's kick it on. Just hear the clean guitar as it comes through. And then we'll kick on the tape. Oh, and I forgot to mention the filter control here by default is set at 5000 hertz to take off some of the low end to give it kind of a lo-fi feel, but obviously coming down. And that doesn't have a real aggressive cue on it. It's enough that, you hear it, but it doesn't sound like it has any resonance on it or anything. So yeah, if we want to, we can push our overdrive a little bit more here. Pick up the dropouts. I think this is such a pretty guitar that I think actually having full dropouts kind of is like too much. But, you know, it gives you a good sense of what that sounds like. And then let's hear our reverb. The default reverb is set on something like 4 seconds. Yeah, 4.8 seconds. So, you know, just come down to the reverb page and you want to go nuts. You could go nuts. And again, because the reverb's happening before that overdrive, the whole tail of that reverb is hitting the overdrive. So if we give it a little bit more distortion here again. And having your reverb before that drive, you still hear the clarity and the crackle of the distortion, but your original signal is, you know, obviously smeared by the reverb there. And just for fun, like I said, I didn't give a control for it, but with your vibrato width, which is your frequency modulation, its default's 25. If we just go all the way with the width, you know, you can hear how wonky that sounds. So this is like dying motor or dying battery kind of tape machine. So there you go. Like I said, pretty straightforward signal path. I gave what I thought, or what I hope is, you know, some reasonable controls on the front page here. But as always, you can go in and dive through and make any adjustments you want to make to fine-tune things. Try to keep things somewhat organized. Pages are named. At least on the front, I've named all of these value modules, so you don't have to remember what they control. You can just see on the title there. And that's it. So, I hope you guys enjoy. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.